Josh Howard's going to come up. And instead of me blogging all about residency and what the advantage of training is, I was going to ask Josh a couple questions for him to share of what he's getting out of his residency training. So Josh, tell us, how'd you even end up in North Carolina planting a church?
Yes, so my family and I were living in Austin, Texas, and we believed God was calling us to North Carolina. So the first person in North Carolina I talked to is Chris. And probably like you were just saying, I thought, maybe a month or two in a residency, and I've been a pastor long enough, I can jump right in and man, we're going to plant the world's best church within 2 months. And so Chris had enough wisdom and insight to connect me in two specific ways. One was to have some fun. You heard Aaron share the story yesterday, but then the other was to introduce us to passion for planning. And really quick in that process, I began to understand I didn't even know the right questions to ask, let alone the right things to do. And so through that process, God just kind of pointed us that way. And then also as a Buffalo Bills fan, looking for a fellow Buffalo Bills fan, because we knew that through adversity, if we could endure being Bills fans, we could plant a church, because
That's right.
life is full of heartbreak.
That's right.
So,
And disappointment.
Yes.
Yeah, keep moving forward.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, actually, the first time Josh we talked, he called me up and he goes, all right, first question, I see you have a Buffalo area code. Are you a Bills fan? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, we can continue this conversation. So it's been great. It's been great. Now, yeah, that was a great thing. Great point that Josh brought up. A lot of church planters we see, they've got oftentimes a lot of good answers, but oftentimes they're not asking all the right questions. So through our training process and project managers, we want to help them make sure they're asking the right questions. So Josh is a resident now. What's your week look like? What are you spending your time doing?
Yeah, so the way Passion for Planning has it set up, you can do your residency while you're in the process of planning a church. And so every Wednesday from 9 to 3, we spend about 6 hours together virtually. And then twice a year we come together in Northern Virginia as a cohort. And so part of my week leading up to Wednesday is doing some of the different deliverables that Sean was talking about. But so there's the Wednesday piece of the residency, but then there's a couple days that I'm spending at our sending church, Hepzibah, connecting with people there. Also part of my residency, learning from them, building relationships, but then also being rooted in the community. There's still plenty of time for us to build relationships. We've launched our first small group, doing those kind of things to get us ready for launch. So it's preparing for the residency, but the residency is also then preparing me to plant as well.
Yeah. And so how would you say participating in this residency has prepared you to plant? What are some things that you're like, man, I'm really grateful that I've done this because now I'm ready in this way?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it earlier, the idea of being filled with vision, but yet not necessarily a plan to execute, to carry out. And so if you guys are familiar with the DISC profile, I'm a D and an I. And so I'm very weak in the area of C, which is kind of that area of putting a plan together and carrying it out. So I love to have a vision and a dream, but to get into the details is difficult. So having something where it's like a built-in project manager with deliverables that are due each week, is having a coach, someone like you to walk alongside of us, having a team of people that are at different places in their church planting journey to walk with us. Each week having former church planters or current church planters that are coming, that are speaking to us in their area of expertise. All of those things have just been so life-giving. I think one of the big things, though, is just the idea of different strategies and systems that we've kind of put together throughout the process. It's been really, really helpful to have those on paper, but then to kind of bounce them off of proven leaders. I kind of look at it like this. Those of you with kids, if you remember when you first got married and you would spend time with other couples who had kids, you would think probably you and your wife are like, man, they're doing this wrong, they're doing that wrong. And I'm a parent, I'm going to, right? Have you remember saying that in those days? And I remember that until I had my first kid, and I'm like, dang, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And then my kids were toddlers, and I was a youth pastor, and I was like, man, these parents of teenagers don't know what they're doing. And now I've got basically a teenager, and you realize that there's just a naivety that's there. But the way that you become someone who walks wisely is either through life experiences, which as pre-church planners, we don't have those yet, or through someone else's mistakes and someone else's learnings. And so that sets you up in a place where the systems and strategies don't just have to be theory, but you can run them through the grid of other people in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing we have our residents doing is, getting their vision out of their head and onto paper, so they're processing. And Dale Spalding, who is the director for Pastor Planning, for many years, we'd always say, you don't really have clarity on your vision until you've got it out of your head and onto paper. And so, Josh and the other residents have been doing that, walking through that process and the discipline of getting their thoughts and their ideas and their vision out of their head and onto paper, so that not only is it clear to you, but now it's clear to your launch team. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going, so we can all be on the same page together. Last question, Josh. What would you say would be one highlight, or maybe a couple highlights, but big highlight from your time doing your residency?
Yeah, I think there's several different highlights. I think the relationships that were developed, I know that those are going to carry me into launching a church and into life. So that was definitely just, again, having a space to process what God is doing in me and what God wants to do through me. So that would definitely be a highlight. And then I think, just like I mentioned initially, being able to be in a place where I can learn to ask the right questions. As a church planner, most people that set out to plant a church have ministry experience, but not church planting experience. And so just that's two different sides of the brain in some ways. And so just being in that place of beginning to think that way and think differently. And then I would just say, spiritually, it's been really, really great for my soul as well. So we spend time, every other time we get together, we ask the question, how's your following and how's your fishing doing? Right? Like, how are you doing at living out what you're expecting your team to do, what you're hoping to see God do in your community, right? If you're going to make disciples who make disciples, it starts with the leadership. It starts with top down. And that has just been challenging to me. It has moved me to have gospel conversations when maybe I would have been a little bit more laid back. But I knew Wednesday's coming and I'm going to be asked about how am I engaging my community, my neighbors, my sphere of influence. And so that has just been super life-giving.
Nice. Cool. Thank you, Josh.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.